I personally love that one, the office building. I have seen M&A deals where the owner owns the business and they also own the office. They rent the office to their business and then they sell the business. And so they get the money from selling the business. And then the person who buys the business continues to pay rent to them, right? So they've got cash flow coming in two ways.
Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I have a treat for you because when it comes to talking about your numbers, all of you are going to throw up a smoke screen and say, that's it. I'm not listening to this episode. But you know that that's what I'm all about. I mean, you're freaking listening to the Profit with Law podcast. It has the name Profit in it. So we're going to talk about numbers. But today's guest is somebody who runs a accounting business, but really they do virtual CFO services. I love the name virtual CFO services. And I love this idea of being able to fractionalize something that you probably need to be pretty well advanced in your growth journey to think about bringing somebody on. I mean, how big does your business have to be to think about bringing on a full-time CFO onto your staff? And I'll let you sit with that question for a moment. Probably pretty decent sized law firm. You know, maybe you're in excess of 2 million, maybe even 5 million in revenue, is when you could start thinking about being able to pay somebody in that role. We have a tendency to hire an in-house bookkeeper or an in-house, person who's going to take care of billing and invoice collections. But a CFO, somebody who has the business mindset, who can help you make big financial decisions, who can help you with the growth trajectory of your law firm, you may not be ready for that role for a while. So this might be a conversation that you want to listen to, regardless of where you are in the journey of your law firm growth. So I'm excited to jump in. We're going to introduce our guest in just a moment, but I want to take this opportunity to tell you about something that we have going on here at Profit with Law. So you all know we have an elite coaching program. We help law firm owners really kill it in their law firm growth. Our law firm owners are getting something like 10x their revenue and 4x the profit. No, I got that backwards. 10x the profit, right? 4x the revenue, 10x the profit in 12 months. We had Becky Torres here on the podcast talking about her growth. And she shared with us how she went from losing money to 40% profit margin in 12 months. So if that's something that you would love for your law firm, if you've been working at this and trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? Like, why can't I move the needle? Why can't I get more clients? Why can't I make more money? Why can't I bring money home? Why does it always feel like I'm moving money from my personal account into my business account to cover expenses? It's supposed to be working the other way around. If you want to have a conversation with us, we offer a very select few number of free coaching slots every month that we make available to you. So if you want to take advantage of that and have a wonderful coaching call with one of our coaches, go to profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. We'd love to have a great conversation with you, help you get out of your own way and figure out what is keeping you back, what can help move your business forward. So let me introduce you to our guest today. Our guest today is Sarah Young. Sarah Young is the founder of Young & Company, and she also has her own podcast. So love it when two podcast hosts get together. We have great conversation. We're both comfortable behind the mic. Her podcast is Profit + Prosper, Profit and Prosper. Look it up in your podcast players. Go listen to her show. And if you like it, subscribe to it. if you like this show, make sure you subscribe to us as well. And we're going to have a wonderful conversation now with Sarah. So Sarah Young is the host of the Profit and Prosper podcast and the founder of Young & Co., a virtual CFO agency that helps business owners find financial peace and generate freedom and wealth. After finding that working with small business owners was far more fulfilling than working for large companies, Sarah committed herself and her business to helping business owners be more wealthy and well. When she's not helping clients maximize their profit to create more confidence and stability in their business, you can likely find her hanging with her son and husband. I love it when family people come on the podcast. You all know that I have 6 children myself, and I am very much involved in their lives. As a matter of fact, I at one point wanted to start a podcast. I still do. I just don't have enough time in the day, but I wanted to start a podcast called Mr. Mom or something like that, because at the time that I had this idea, I was a single dad. I've since married and had 3 more children since that idea first was placed in my head. But it really bothered me that the role of mom and dad was so delineated that, like, in my school, they would have specific functions that were labeled mother, daughter, mother, and there's a place for those, but it was too many of them. Like, I wasn't invited to as a dad, to a lot of the events that was happening in school for my daughters. And I was the one primarily caring for them. And that really bothered me. So I wanted to, have a podcast around parenting. Parenting is a really big, strong, passionate area of mine. Loving parenting and being really involved in your kids' lives. But anyway, that is a complete tangent. We can have another episode talking about that. Let's talk about virtual CFO stuff with Sarah Young. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. And we really appreciate the time that you gave us to be here today. People don't realize that when we hit record on the mic, we're probably like 30 minutes into a time slot. We get to know each other beforehand. We, cover some ground about, what should we talk about? What shouldn't we talk about? Sometimes we connect people with each other. It's a networking event. There's all kinds of things that happen there. And we're 35 minutes into this slot and we're first hitting record. So I really appreciate the time that you're giving us. I like to start the interview with an easy question for you, and really helps set the stage for the rest of the conversation, because people are listening and they're like, who is this person, Sarah Young? What's going on? So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today, how you ended up going into accounting and talking about profit. Give us the backstory of Sarah Young.
Yes. Well, first off, I am happy to be here because had it not been for this podcast interview, we probably would never have talked to each other. And I love to just network. So I'm happy to do it. I have been in accounting for over 12 years. I've got my CPA license. I started my career back, in, 2012 in public accounting. I worked at Deloitte. I worked at large, companies. And it's interesting you started talking about kids, because one of the catalysts for me quitting my, high salary corporate job in the middle of a recession, or not a recession, in the middle of the pandemic, I went full time with my business in 2020 after my son was born in March 2020, literally 2 weeks before everything shut down from COVID. But I remember when I was pregnant and before I was pregnant, people that I worked with would say things like, oh, I'm the first one to drop my kid off at daycare in the morning, and I'm always the last one to pick them up. And it was almost coming from this place of like, look how hard I work, like, look how dedicated I am to my job. And I just remember thinking, like, there's no freaking way that I'm going to do this and, subscribe to this belief, which is, you'd think with accountants, like the amount that accounting people tend to work, that we're, performing open heart surgeries or something crazy. Like, we're not. So that was really the catalyst for what got me out of the corporate life. But interestingly, I was a teacher. I did high school math for 2 years after college because I had a business major, but I graduated in 2009, and I remember, going to all of the career sessions, and they basically told us, good luck getting a good job. Nobody's hiring. So I did Teach for America for 2 years, which I actually think helped me to be able to explain some of these complicated topics to people in a way that makes sense to them. Because if I can teach high school algebra to, 14-year-olds who don't want to be there, certainly I can teach business owners how to think about their money. So then I went back to get my, master's degree in accounting, did the whole corporate thing. And then one of the catalysts, really the thing that planted the seed in my head for doing my own thing, was my in-laws had a large business, and they were really struggling with finding good help on the finance front, because I think they had a tax accountant and he ended up retiring, and they had an in-house quote unquote controller. I'm using air quotes if you can't see me on video, but I use the term loosely because, this sort of speaks to what you were talking about a little bit ago about when do you need to hire a full-time CFO in your business. And I still think, this business that didn't need a full-time CFO, because what this person ended up doing in their business was they spent a heck of a lot of time on administrative stuff like running payroll. You end up being a high paid sort of bookkeeper accountant, and you don't get a lot of the benefit of the CFO stuff, which is why I like the fractional model. So anyways, they ended up getting this, crazy notice from the IRS. They had a freak out moment, and I was like, let me help you. And so I did. And I realized how difficult it is for so many business owners to get support in the finance area. I mean, I know we all working in the small business finance space, you hear the stories of, my tax accountant doesn't ever respond back to me. I have errors on my tax return. What do I do? I think it's just, it's an area where I see a lot of opportunity to help people make more money. And so that's what I do.
I love that, the journey, and especially the story that's close to home. I mean, the catalyst for going on your own was having your son, and then, your parents needing help. You started your business, you start attracting clients. Do people seek out virtual CFO services, or do they seek out a tax accountant and then you say, well, you really need a virtual CFO? What's the actual catalyst for somebody to seek out the services that you offer?
So that's an interesting question. I think that the term CFO is getting to be trendy these days. I don't know if you see this, but I do think it's becoming trendy. And so it's important on the one hand to make sure that when you're hiring a CFO, you're actually getting a CFO and not, bookkeeping that's being called CFO services. But most of the clients that come to me, most of them, not all, but they have had a tax accountant or a bookkeeper or both in the past, and they're just realizing, I need more support. And so they come to me and they say, hey, let's talk about what is it that you can do that goes above and beyond what the tax accountant that I have is currently doing and my bookkeeper. And so that's what we do.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual things that business owners don't know, or they know they need to know, but they don't know. And how much of this is educating them, and how much of this is doing things for them. So let's first, let's start at the beginning. What does the typical business owner know about their business, and what are the things that they don't know that they really need to know to be able to make better decisions moving forward that you can help them with?
I think that most business owners have, whether they have the data or not, they have an intuition about this is going well or this isn't, right? They know I have cash flow coming in or I don't. Even if you don't have a good P&L that says whether or not you have cash flow, you have a sense of okay, my bank balance is growing or it's not, right? I'm struggling to meet payroll, or I have people come to me. One recently had $125,000 sitting in her checking account. She's like, I don't know what to do with this, And so I think business owners, you don't want to discount, you have an intuition of how things are going. What I like to do is connect the dots from what is your intuition telling you? Back to the data, because your finances, it's really just data. And what we do is help you with reporting and planning to be able to sort of paint a picture with the data to say, this is what's happening. This is what your business could look like if you grow it in the future, and just like show you how do the numbers work and just sort of show you the possibilities, right? And I really think that those are the two areas I see a lot of people not doing when you have, even if you have a bookkeeper or if you have somebody who's doing tax prep for you, most people are not leveraging the data they have to make decisions. And then you're not really sitting down and creating a plan.
So I love this idea of sitting down and creating a plan. And, those of you who have been listening to us long enough know that that's an area that I harp on a lot. And one of the problems is that you don't necessarily know how to create a plan, right? Which is why you need somebody to help guide you on that. But what goes into creating a plan, and why is that so valuable?
So the planning piece, I have a couple things. Number one, I don't think it has to be nearly as complicated as people think that it has to be. I think sometimes when I say you need a plan for your business, you think, I have to create some like 5-10 year business plan, like fully fleshed out projections and all of this. And I know like, I don't do that. I feel like it's just a waste of time because frankly, it's never going to work out the way that you want it to work out. Like the only time you really need that is probably if you're applying for a loan. And so when I think about planning, one of the things I love to start with is really getting into how much money do you need from your business? And one of the things that people say to me all the time when I say, how far are you in your retirement planning? Or maybe you don't want to retire. Maybe you want to, reach just financial freedom by the time you're like 45 or whatever. That's my goal. But a lot of times people say, my business is my retirement. And when I push them on that, it's like, what does that actually mean? How is your business your retirement? They don't know. And so a lot of times we start there just from a planning perspective. And I'm not a CFP, a financial planner. I do have some I like refer people to sometimes, but I think it's important to get an idea of one, how much do you need to be able to retire? So that, even if people say, like, I'm sure you hear this too, people say, well, I want to work forever. I love what I do. And my response is, well, that's great. But if you're 70 and you get sick or maybe you just get burned out finally when you're 70 and you say, I want to be able to step back. This is what happened with my in-laws with their business was they were getting older and they didn't have a plan. They had a business where on paper they should have had tons and tons of money, but they didn't have a plan. And so what are they going to do when they retire? You get stuck in this trap, right, of relying on the cash flow from your business. So I like to start there with how much do you need to retire? Is your goal to sell your business? How much do you want to sell it for? And then from there, we back into what does the profit need to be? Because the sales price will be based on the profit. The amount of contributions you can make to a retirement plan are going to be based on the profit in your business, right? And then back into it from there. So I take really the personal goals and then say, okay, your business then needs to do these things. Whether that is you need to be able to hire a team because you're a mom. A lot of our clients are moms and women, as you can imagine. So maybe you don't want to work full time. So that means you need a team. You need to structure your offers the right way, your pricing the right way to make all of these things possible. It's really just a big puzzle. So we reverse engineer from the sort of personal goals.
Yeah, I really like I like that approach. There's this mantra. I don't know who says it. Begin with the end in mind. But that's really what you need to do when you're planning is really know where you're headed. When I talk about planning, and I talk about it a lot on webinars I do. I recently did a webinar together with Get Staffed Up, which is a tightly integrated partner of ours. And I may as well give them a shameless plug here since I brought them up. Folks, if you're thinking about bringing somebody on, hiring somebody, it seems overwhelming because it can be so expensive to hire somebody stateside. Get Staffed Up is a great place to go if you're if you can get away with a virtual assistant. These are great staffers. I actually have 3 people on staff that came from Get Staffed Up, and they're located outside of the U.S. You don't pay employment taxes on them, and it simply costs you $1,850 a month for a full-time employee, and you can train them to do anything that you want. So if that's something that interests you, you can actually get $750 off of your startup fee by going to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up, profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Okay, we gave them a plug. But I recently did a webinar with them in collaboration with them, and the webinar was titled something like 5 mistakes law firm owners make, or something, or 5 things that 5 secrets that you need to know to be profitable, something like that. Anyway, one of the things that I covered in there was this idea of planning. And when I talk about planning, I give the analogy of a GPS, right? When you want to go somewhere, you need to have a destination to enter into the GPS. If you don't have that, it's worthless, right? There's no way, unless you intuitively know where you're going, you're just going to, okay, I'm going from New York to Florida, I'm just going to drive south. Yeah, you can get to Florida eventually doing that, but you won't be able to avoid traffic. You won't be able to know the best route to take. You probably will detour a bunch of times, not realizing it. But then you could be going somewhere a little bit more complicated. Maybe you're going somewhere in the backwoods of Iowa from New York, and okay, maybe I really can't figure out how to get there without having the destination in place, right? So there's actually 3 components you need with a GPS or order to be able to figure out where you're going to go, right? You need to know your starting point, you need to know your destination, and you also need to know the fastest way to get there from starting point to destination. And you might have to reroute along the way to get around things that come up, right? A traffic jam happens, like a tractor trailer turns over. It wasn't there when you started, but it's there now. Now you need to reroute. You need to get around it. Business is the same thing. When we create a plan, we have to know what our destination is in order to create the best way to get there from point A to point B, from where we are today to where we want to go. And then we may have to adjust that plan along the way when something goes wrong, something doesn't work out exactly as planned, and we have to readjust, and you have to make those tweaks. So it's not like set it and forget it. It's actually it's a living document. It's a living plan that you have to change and alter as you go. But I love this approach that you take, where it's, hey, let's begin with the end. What is it that you want? Now, interestingly, your end that you start with is retirement. When I work with my clients, I start with, hey, what do you want to bring home? Like right now, what are your immediate needs? What are your saving needs? And we go through like the things that they want. Hey, I want to save money for my kids' college. I want to save money for a retirement home or a vacation home, and things like that. But I love this idea of getting away from, hey, my business is my retirement. Folks, did you ever hear of don't put all your eggs in one basket? You've got your business is your retirement, means that essentially it's like taking, let's just say you had $1 million put away for retirement, and then you put it all into Apple stock. Right? Who's to say that Apple's going to keep growing? At some point, everybody's going to have an iPhone, everybody's going to have an iPad, everybody's going to have a Mac. They're going to have to come up with a new product, or it's simply going to be a commodity company that sells a certain amount of widgets, right? So it might not continue to grow like it has in the past. You might park your $1 million in Apple, and all of a sudden it loses half of its value. Now what? Right? So that's putting all your eggs in one basket. You need to have a diversified portfolio, whatever the assets are. It happens to be that your primary asset is your business, but that's where, as you grow and as you create that cash flow from your business, you have places you can park it, and you can save taxes along the way, massive amounts of taxes. Because when you start to really be successful, you might end up paying, depending on which state you're living in, you might end up paying close to 50% of your income in taxes. And if you can, hey, I don't know, put up $250,000 into a retirement account, you can shield that from taxes. So really understanding where you're going and what your objective is really important to making these decisions along the way, rather than, I don't know, blowing it on a couple of extra Teslas just in case.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, we definitely talk about pay as one of the immediate goals because, most people don't pay themselves or they don't pay themselves regularly. But, when I talk about your profit, I really mean how much money are you making above and beyond what it takes you to live your life? And the reason I start with retirement is because I have literally seen it happen more than one time where a business owner gets stuck at a place where they didn't make that plan and they just thought, oh, I'll deal with it later, or, it'll somehow magically work out. And, maybe you end up shutting it down. Maybe you sell and you manage to get some money out of it, but your retirement ends up not being as good as it could be. And so I start there because it's so important. And I also know it's one of those areas that people, for whatever reason, like to procrastinate. And so I just try to bring awareness to that, not to really harp on it, but just to sort of force the conversation. And no, you're so like the diversification is really important. And I think, you hear people talk about millionaires have 7 streams of income. And for a business owner, I think it might be easy to assume that your 7 streams of income could be like different offers that you might have in your business. But I would say no, you need to make sure that you have other assets outside of your business, and your business is going to fund every one of those. But you've got to make sure you have multiple different things so that if one of them goes down, you don't have to go work somewhere while you're retired instead of, going and sipping margaritas in Florida or whatever you want to go do.
Yeah, the way I like to explain to business owners what is the purpose of your business, it's not really to have an asset in retirement. As a matter of fact, I mean, we work with lawyers. Law firms are something that's very difficult to hand off to somebody else. Often you built the business tied to your name, right? It's and people are seeking you out. And if you retire, what does that do to the value of the business? And how much is your name worth when you're not there? So and that's why there's a lot of people now that are moving away from that. And like there's a friend I have on Facebook who he goes by the patent professor, right? And that's his law firm's name. It's not tied to his name. He could probably sell that for a lot more than if he had called it, Rizvi and Associates.
Or Young and Co.
Right, exactly. So, so when you tie it to your name, it automatically makes it harder to sell. But really, it's what is the purpose of the business and in your financial wealth journey? And the purpose of the business is to create cash so that you can invest in other places that are going to create income without the effort that business takes. The more assets that you have that generate income, the better off you are. So there's a lot of places you could do that. I mean, you could do it in the stock market. You could do it with real estate. You can do it, you can put it in bonds. There's a lot of different vehicles to taking cash and then turning it into more cash. So Sarah, is there, and you already made the disclaimer of, hey, I'm not a financial advisor, right? I'm not a CFP is what you said, right? But you got to give guidance to your clients, in some way, shape, or form, right? So what is what's your favorite place to push them to say, hey, once you start having some extra cash, this is the first place that I would send you to start doing something with it?
Yeah. Well, so no, I'm not a CFP. It's one of those things I've thought either I just need to go take the exam or hire somebody who can be that for my firm. That's like one of my 2023, 2024 goals. But, as a tax accountant, I mean, as part of our like outsourced finance service, we do the tax piece because for me as a CFO, if I don't have somebody who is doing a tax plan and thinking tax strategies, whether that's me or somebody else on my team, I feel like I don't have a complete picture of your cash flow because tax is obviously a huge expense. And so we talk about when we do tax strategies and long-term financial strategies is where are you going to put your money? So you're paying yourself regularly, and with a profit above and beyond that, what do you do with it? And I wouldn't say that I have a favorite place because everybody's really different. Most of the clients that I work with tend to be the type who are serial entrepreneurs. And so a lot of them do things like buy franchise businesses, or, maybe they acquire add-on businesses to add to theirs to expand that way. And so obviously when you buy a business, you get a ton of deductions on your tax return for those. So that can be a really great place. Some of my clients have anywhere from 1 to like 10 rental properties or more. I can't remember how many they have, but obviously putting money into real estate is also a great place. And so if you're the type who wants to do that kind of thing, then we build that into your plan. The one thing I do like to point out is I think some people tend to default to wanting to put all of their cash into like a 401k or something, a SEP IRA where you get the tax deductions now up front. And I like to just point out a few things. Like number one, we really have to ask, are you going to be in a lower tax bracket after you retire? That's the assumption for most Americans, but I think that most financial advice talking about retirement is targeted at employees who are going to go from having a salary to not having a salary in retirement. And that's not you if you're listening to this podcast. So we have to ask ourselves that question. And then, for me and for a lot of clients, I'm 35. I want to be able to completely retire if I want to. I probably won't because I like to work, but I want to have my freedom fund completely built up by the time I'm 45. And so if I wanted to step back from my business, we also have to consider cash flow before and after you hit retirement age, because if you put all of your money into a retirement account, then you can't withdraw it without penalties, without having to do Roth conversions and paying the taxes on it and all of that. And so my answer is it depends. I know that's not really an answer. I think it just depends on the person and what their goals are, what their current, investment situation looks like.
Yeah, what's interesting is that as you start, and there's a lot of people who aren't even thinking about this because maybe their business is not creating this cash flow yet. And really that's the first goal, right? Like, how do we get your business to have a good profit margin, to be throwing off this extra money, and then to get large enough that is meaningful, right? I mean, if your profit margin is 40% and you're bringing in 100,000 in revenue, you're making $40,000, right? But if your profit margin is 40% and you're bringing in 2 million, you're making $800,000, right? There's a big difference. So your business has to be large enough in size, and the profit margin has to be healthy for you to have this extra cash that you're throwing off. But it's totally doable for you to be, once you exceed, $1 million in revenue. If you have a healthy run business, you should have a decent amount of cash flow that you're throwing off. Now, yeah, you're going to plow some of that back into the business, and that's another trap, right? I'm going to keep growing the business, so I'm going to put all the money back into the business.
Reinvesting all my profits, such a pet peeve of mine when people say that.
Yeah. It's almost like when the stock market's going down, I keep buying because I'm dollar cost averaging down, right? Like it's one of those things that it sounds good, it makes sense on logically, but when it comes down to actually doing it, it's actually a bad behavior because you don't have a way of exiting that, right? You don't have an exit plan. There isn't a place where you pull the ripcord and say, oh, this is where I stop. This is what I'm not doing anymore. Now, if you had a plan that said, hey, look, I'm going to go for a 40% profit margin and I don't have a lot of financial needs right now, so I'm going to purposely choose to take 20% of the profit, 20% and half the profit, right? 20% profit margin and put it back in the business, and 20% I'm going to take home. Then that's doing it, that's doing it with a plan and with purpose and really thinking about it. But just turning around and saying, yeah, we did really well, but the reason that I don't have anything to show for it is because I decided to buy a building and to invest in this machinery, and or in this case with legal services, I decided to continue to staff up, and by staffing up, I'm creating more capacity for the next round of business to come in. Yeah, you might be doing that, but when do you stop to reap the rewards, right? When do you stop to allow the cash to actually come to your bank account and for you to do something with it? So I think that's something to be really careful about. But when we look at, okay, where does this cash go? And you gave a really good political answer. It depends. And I think that you're correct, right? I don't think you were dodging the bullet. I think that everybody has a different risk tolerance. Everybody has a different thing that they're comfortable with. They have their own money baggage they bring with them. This is what I saw my parents do, or this is what saw my parents do, and I don't want to do what they did, kind of thing. But even when it comes to real estate, or even when it comes to the stock market, which are the two biggest places that you can look, and you talk about franchise businesses, right? Start another business. I mean, that's another great place to go. But when you look at these, every one of them has a variety of options, right? So even if you say, okay, I'm going to do the stock market, well, are you a long-term investor, or are you a short-term trader? Are you a day trader? Are you trading options, or are you buying stock for the long term? When it comes to real estate, are you owning an Airbnb business? Are you buy and hold, rental properties? Are you doing fix and flips? Are you investing in a large real estate fund that's buying, massive apartment buildings, and you're just a shareholder in a partnership? There's so many different things and so many different ways that you can go when it comes to each of these individual options. So the key is the same way that you're listening to this podcast and educating yourself on how to run a law firm and run it profitably, and think about the right things and make the right decisions along the way. You have to do your due diligence when it comes to, okay, what am I going to do with my money? It's not just, oh, let me meet with a CFP and whatever they say I'm going to do. That's the beginning of the education process, right? That's where it starts. And you really need to figure out, what is it that I want to try? What is it that I want to do? We had a guest on the podcast. My team will link it up in the show notes. I don't remember his name, but he talked about how they used there's a certain SBA loan that lets you borrow money to buy your office building. And they basically had to put half, they had to invest half of their own funds, and then the loan covered the rest. But they bought their office building, and that's something that is a separate asset that's going to grow, adds value maybe to the sale price of the firm, or you could sell the building off later and have this cash out. It's just one option that you have that can really be tied to the business that you're running, but still be a separate vehicle for your financial growth.
Yeah, I will say about that, I personally love that one, the office building. I have seen M&A deals where the owner owns the business and they also own the office. They rent the office to their business, and then they sell the business. And so they get the money from selling the business. And then the person who buys the business continues to pay rent to them, right? So they've got cash flow coming in two ways, and that can be amazing. I've seen several examples where if you buy the right real estate, then when you go to sell it, it can be worth as much or more than your business is.
Yeah, absolutely. I know somebody who went into a car wash franchise, and as with any retail business, location is key, right? So when the franchise is doing well, it's because of the location. And so what he did is he would always buy the property that he was opening the car wash on. And once he had the franchise extremely profitable, he would sell the franchise, keep the property, and he amassed this whole portfolio of properties where he was just renting it out to the buyers of the car wash. He knew that he had a profitable business sitting on it, so it's pretty much guaranteed he's going to continue to collect rent. And if they ever run the business into the ground, he can always buy it back from them for a song and do it again. So it's a very interesting model. Like, once you start getting creative like that, there's a lot of options that open, but you have to get to the point where your business is highly profitable to be able to do any of this, right? And I think that's where business owners might go wrong, is not realizing that that's the name of the game, right? And that's the purpose of what I'm doing, is not necessarily to create my retirement. The purpose of what I'm doing is to create this massive amount of cash that I can then use to create my basket of retirement producing, income producing vehicles that are going to carry me through. And it doesn't, we call it retirement, but I mean, heck, it can start paying dividends now, right? I mean, this can pay income right away, and then start to create a better life for you, whether it's now I can afford a vacation home, or now I can afford to take multiple vacations through the years, or maybe now I can send my kid to an Ivy League school that wasn't in, something I was thinking about before. There's so many options that it opens for you by having all this extra income from these other places, but that it all takes time. It's something that grows as you develop it. It gets bigger and bigger. It's almost like it snowballs into, all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, whoa, I'm a multimillionaire.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of this isn't to, be overwhelming. I hope that just us talking about all these options gives people just some excitement around what you can do if you put in the work to create a profitable business. And so, I talk about these things as really just to give people an idea of what's even possible for you that you can work toward. But then, yeah, to your point, you've got to make money in your business, which, I have actually a client now, they do about 10 to 12 in revenue, $10 to $12 million in revenue, and they're still not profitable. And so all of that goes back to say, we need to have a plan, but then you also have to pay attention to how your business is running to make sure that, you're making money, because a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking like, when I grow my business to 7 figures, or when I grow my business to the next level, it'll magically be profitable because I have more revenue coming in the door. But, as you've probably heard us touch on, a lot of business owners tend to just take that extra money and toss it right back into something, reinvesting in their business, but it's not actually what will grow their profitability. And so I think it's important to have a plan for both, like the personal side. What are you going to do? How are you going to become a millionaire, a multimillionaire? But then how's your business actually going to get you there?
Yeah, I love that delineation, because you're right. Not every dollar I reinvest in the business is going to have the same return on investment, and that's really something that I need to pay attention to, right? If I invest in real estate, I might get 25% return on my dollar year over year. If I make this purchase for my business, or make this investment for my business, maybe I don't know, hire another attorney or invest in this marketing thing, and we run the numbers, maybe it doesn't create that same level of return. And maybe it makes more sense for me to just take it home and buy another real rental property or something like that. So, and I'm not giving specifics, I'm just giving an example of, when we compare what our options are, there's always an opportunity cost, right? When we take this dollar and we use it here, we can't use it in these other places. And we need to look at that. And that's what a CFO does for you, right? The CFO gives you, runs these multiple scenarios and says, here's the options on the table, and this is what it might look like if we put this, this money here, or to put this money there, what it might look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And that's really what you want to know and what you want to look at. And it's never black and white, right? It's never, this is it. There's always other factors and considerations. And ultimately it's a decision you get to make. And it's a great place to be, making those decisions. Sarah, I have a question for you. You mentioned a term a little while back, and I've been wanting to ask you about it. You said financial freedom, right? And you used those words, and you said something around the fact that your goal is to have financial freedom by the time you're 45. What does financial freedom mean? I feel like people throw that term around. And I know that you're going to say it depends, and and it's different for everybody, right? But how does somebody determine what financial freedom means to them? And is that the thing? Is that the carrot? Is that the light at the end of the tunnel? Is that the thing, the prize that we're going for in our journey, our wealth journey?
Yes, I actually won't say it depends in this case. So I think that financial freedom, or maybe a better term would be financial independence, is having enough in assets to your name that produce enough cash flow to where you can live and you don't have to earn another dollar. So it's sort of like, if I have enough assets built up in my investment accounts, in real estate, and whatever my assets are going to be, that if I said, you know what, I don't want to run this business anymore, I'm tired of it, which, like, to be clear, I'm not, but if I did, then it gives me the freedom to say I can do that, right? And so I think that is the goal. And I like to use that term instead of retirement, because retirement just seems it seems like something you do when you're old. And I don't want to be old when I'm finally, financially independent. But I think a lot of the clients I work with too are in a similar boat as me, where most of them are women. A lot of them have kids or plan to have kids soon. And they're like, I just want to be able to enjoy my life, along the way. And as part of that, it's having the money, the cash flow coming in every month to be able to afford your life without you having to sit and stare at your laptop all the time. So that's what I think financial freedom is. And I think the amount that every person needs is going to depend on all of your personal needs, including like how much you need to pay yourself, what are your goals, all of that. But ultimately it's the same end goal.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that it's important for everybody to know what that is, right? To find that for yourself and really know that this is, this is what I'm striving for as, I don't know if it's step one. I was going to say as step one, but I don't know if it's step one. Maybe step one is, just paying the bills and not creating any more debt in your business. But right after that is, let's march on our journey to financial independence, as you called it.
I think that phase one really is becoming stable. And I define stability in your business as you're able to pay your bills in your business, but you're also able to pay all of your life bills. Like you're paying yourself enough money to keep the lights on and hopefully have some spending money. But actually the calculation, or you can do a ballpark number of what that looks like. And I love to do that early on as a tool, just so we kind of have a goal for like, this is what we're doing. And this is hopefully like where your business is going to take you. And, sometimes I find like, I don't want to do it in a way that seems overwhelming. Like if somebody's got, $100,000 in student loan debt to pay off, and they're thinking, oh my God, I need $3 million to be able to retire. Like it can seem like a lot, but I think it's nice to have something to tie yourself back to remember, like, this is why I'm doing this. And so I can get to this end goal.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we can keep going for hours, but we're going to have to wrap this show up. We're going to have to end it at some point. So this is going to be a great point to do that. What I do at the end of an interview episode is I ask our guests 2 questions, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. First, I want you to share with our listeners, what is the number one takeaway or lesson or tip that you want to share with them, as they walk away from this episode? What is the last thought you want to put in their mind? The second thing is if somebody is interested in learning more about you, having a conversation with you, maybe thinking about working with you, what is the next step for them to take to interact with you and your company?
Yeah. So, well, I think we really went down the path of just talking about planning. And I think if I were to give somebody a takeaway, I think one of the biggest mistakes I think business owners make is just feeling like coming up with a plan is something overwhelming. And I think that it can be simpler than you think it is to come up with like, really, what is your financial plan, and start putting numbers around the business goals that you have set. And, more than just saying, I want to get to a 6-figure business or a 7-figure business or whatever that vanity metric is, but really stepping back and thinking, what is the purpose of your business? Like we've talked about. So I think that's the takeaway, is just like, take some time and sit with that and really think about, what would it take for me to get from where I am now to there, and start taking steps, start plugging that address into your GPS and start driving down the road. Because I think a lot of people, I love the roadmap analogy too. Like you can end up in California when you wanted to go to Florida. And obviously that's not the place that you want to be. So I think that's the main takeaway. And then if you love podcasts, go listen to mine, Profit and Prosper. I talk about, the money side of business, but I try to make it fun and approachable in a way that people walk away and you feel like, you know what, I feel like I understand this. I'm not going to teach you, all of the tax rules and about tax deductions and all of that mess. Like, I think you need to go hire a tax person to deal with that. We're going to talk about for the big picture, financial strategy stuff that I think is important. And if you need a CFO for your team, whether that is outsourcing your finance team, or if you want to focus on the strategic tax component of that, we have our virtual CFO is our monthly service, and we have a really great annual tax package that, is sort of the level before having a fully outsourced CFO, where if you're making a healthy profit in your business, you end up with a big tax bill at the end of the year. Let's talk about what are some of the things you can do to reduce that tax bill and save and invest for the future. So you can find all that on my website, trustyoungco.com, and the consult link. You can book a call with me at the bottom of any page on my website.
Awesome. Sarah, thank you so much. Folks, as you know, we will provide all of these links in our show notes. Show notes can be found at profitwithlaw.com or in your podcast player right underneath the episode in the description section. You can simply click and go straight to each one of them. If you've enjoyed this episode, and this is one of your first times listening to the Profit with Law podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you get notified every time we release a new episode. We have a new interview that goes live every single Thursday, right there in your player, waiting to be heard. And if you've been listening to us for a while and you really are enjoying the show, we live on ratings and reviews, just like your business lives on ratings and reviews. If you don't have a decent amount of ratings and reviews on Google and somebody's searching for a law firm, they're not choosing you first to call. So same thing here. Somebody's searching for a podcast to listen to, and we don't have a decent amount of ratings and reviews, they're not listening to us first. We'd love to be the ones they listen to first. So if you can take a moment and just go into your podcast player, hit the rate and review option, leave us a star rating. I'm not going to ask for 5 stars, although we would love it if we get it. Just be open and honest. Let everybody know what you got out of the show, whether you think that the show is good, and we'd love to hear from you in that way. Take care. We will catch you next Thursday with our next episode. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.